What's your creepiest glitch in the Matrix or unexplainable thing that's ever happened to you? Story one. Not my story, but my grandpa's. So he served in the Navy and hadn't come home for 5 years. He finally got to go home, and on his way, he saw his old friend. Let's call him Wally. Wally was getting on his normal bus, and my grandpa shouted, "Hi!" to him. But Wally didn't respond. But he didn't think much of it, seeing how Wally didn't have the best hearing. Wally got on his bus and looked my grandpa in the eye as the bus drove away. Later, after he got home and was talking to his dad, he asked him how Wally was doing and told his dad about how he saw him earlier. His dad was silent for a minute and asked him if he was sure he saw Wally. My grandpa said yes, and his dad replied, "Wally died 6 months ago." Story two. When the song The Final Countdown was released in the 80s, I already knew it. It was brand new, just released, but I knew the tune and the words and could sing the whole thing beginning to end. I believed for a while that it was a cover version, but it wasn't. Story three. Okay, my sister and I were playing the age-old game of get the fudge out of my room. If you've never played it before, all you do is try to get the intruder out. I managed to get her outside the door, but she always trying to push it open while I was attempting to close it. Suddenly, I slam it shut, meaning I won. I turn around and there is my very confused sister, wondering how she ended up back in my room. In her confusion, I managed to get her back out. Story four. Around 12 years old, I was watching Megas XLR, or something that was on at the time. Sitting there, I noticed that the sun just turned off, like completely. I was real confused, opened the blinds, and it was dark. Show was still at the same spot, but the clock on the cable box said it was 5 hours later. My best guess for what happened was that I passed out without realizing it, like those nights where you lay in bed and blink and suddenly it's morning. So I'm guessing I fell asleep sitting up for exactly enough time to have Cartoon Network play a rerun of the show. Get to the exact spot I fell asleep at. Was surreal though. Answer. I had an experience like that. I sleep with headphones in due to tinnitus, so I usually play a few old episodes of a podcast to get to sleep. There have been times where my dream will have the podcast playing in the background, perfectly intelligible, and I can fall asleep, listen to a few episodes, and wake up with the podcast still going and pick up where I left off in the dream, perfectly fine. It's wild. Story five. Well, my story is a bit creepy because I lost myself. This was like 7 years ago when I was still in high school. It was a normal day. All classes went well till the math class began. The teacher was explaining the lesson and how it was related to the previous lesson. We had the previous day. Everything the teacher was explaining was new to me and never heard before, so I was like, yeah, sure, I wasn't paying attention again during that class. So I opened my notebook to check what I wrote about that class. I always write everything discussed during math class because I sucked at math, and my dad was strict about it, which got my teacher to be strict also with me, and found nothing about the previous class. I asked my friend sitting next to me to give me his notebook to make sure, and I found like a whole new material from the last class that I've never seen before. So I started investigating after the class, going around asking my classmates this crazy question: was I here yesterday during the math class? And they were like, what? And I explained the whole thing to them, and apparently I was not there. I attended both classes before and after the math class and wrote everything of both classes in my notebook, but I have no memory where I was during the math class. And the schools where I live have a one-class system where students stay in their class and teachers come to them for the lecture, then leave, and the next subject's teacher comes and so on. So we know each other well, and everybody I asked said that I wasn't there during the math class. So yeah, I lost myself for approximately an hour. Story six. Last week I was bringing the bins up from the driveway to the garage for my parents, and when I was directly under the house when I heard a crack from above my head, I looked up and didn't see anything, so I shrugged it off as just my imagination. I turned back to the street and take a few steps forward when I hear something smash into the place that I had been standing. I turn back and see a huge icicle shattered on the ground, the type that could have been used as a club. There were no icicles hanging from the roof when I looked up before. I have another experience kind of like this. I will comment it under this. Answer. When I was about 6, I would often get up in the middle of the night and crawl into bed between my parents. I got up and was walking out of my room when I was suddenly glued to the spot. I remember this part very vividly, even though it was many years ago. I was frozen in the doorway, physically unable to move. Then I saw someone that seemed to be around my age walk out of the bathroom and take a right, opening my parents' bedroom door, going in and then closing the door. I was then able to move, and my young child brain basically said, nope, fudge that, and I turned around and went back to my own bed. In the morning, my parents came in to check on me because I don't usually go back to my own bed after crawling in with them. Story 7. This summer, I bought my girlfriend a last-minute birthday trip to go kayaking around the San Juan Islands off the Washington state coast. After a long drive and ferry trip, we found the tour group of about 20 people and were then shuffled into a shuttle van for a ride to the beach. Now my girlfriend has a unique name similar to the name of a famous painter. Let's say it's Rebecca Warhol. Just for fun, it's not. She's a little ray of sunshine and started chatting with the middle-aged woman sitting next to her on the shuttle as we waited to leave. The woman noted that she had always loved the name Rebecca, as it was her mother's name. They made pleasant small talk in the van until the tour guide passed around the sign-in sheet for all of us to fill out. That's when things got strange. My girlfriend wrote her full name on the sheet and passed it on to the woman, who immediately shouted, "Oh my God," and started crying. After a few minutes of total confusion, she told us, Rebecca Warhol was my mother's full name, and these islands were her favorite place in the world. She passed away this summer from cancer, and we've traveled hundreds of miles to spread her ashes here. We were stunned. I literally picked a random date, time, and tour company, and then we were split into the same group as this woman, and my girlfriend was sitting right next to her on the shuttle. What the hell? She continued by saying, my daughter told us that Nana Rebecca would be with us on this trip, and I didn't believe it until now. It was the most unbelievable coincidence we had ever experienced, and has totally convinced me that there's more to this world than we think. As my brother later said, the universe winked at us that day. Answer: my dad passed away a few years ago from cancer. A few days after his passing, I was helping my mom with some things outside at their house. A butterfly flew up from a bush and into my face a few times and then flew off. I didn't think anything of it, but I look over and see my mom with her mouth open and eyes wide. She then explained that my dad told her, if there's a butterfly flying in your face, that will be him. Story 8. It isn't creepy, but when I was in high school, I had a dream I was in an all-white classroom, totally white, like the ones you would see in a dream, and a girl was sitting in the chair on my side. During the dream, I knew it was a dream because that girl was a senior. We didn't have common classes. About 6 years later, I was at a master class. The sun was shining bright outside. The classroom was very illuminated, and I see this girl on my side. We are doing masters together and having a class in all white fudge classroom. Of course, I remembered the dream at that very moment. Edit. Whoa, 6,000 upvotes. Guys, edit 2. My first award, thanks. This is a fairly classic case of deja vu, but with frightening precision. Imagine keeping an image from a dream in your memory for years, only to have it materialize down to the smallest detail. It makes you think that some moments of our lives are already recorded somewhere. Story 9. A minor one, but why not? My wife and I are space nerds, so we follow pretty much all news regarding space travel. Of course, we're all hyped AF, if skeptical, about the whole Starship thing, and the glitch is exactly about that thing. About 3 years ago, SpaceX YT channel posted this vid showcasing the first iteration of their Mars craft. I watched it on like day 2 with my wife sitting behind me, eyes wide and in absolute awe. We finished watching, I turned back and see that incredulous look on her face. But we already watched this some 3 weeks ago. I look at the posting date. Nope, nada. It was definitely 2 days ago. I do a quick search in YT and Chrome history, going all the way to the beginning of the year. Obviously no trace. I even checked the internet, and ITS, as Starship was called back then, was not even revealed 3 weeks prior. At least not in any video published by SpaceX or any other official site. Then she starts going through things I apparently said back then during that previous watching, up to quoting my exact words, some of which sound pretty similar to what I thought while watching the vid, but definitely didn't speak aloud as I was too stunned and awestruck. At this point, I recall that at 2:40 time mark, she had said something along the lines of, look, now it's going to deploy panels. It looks so funny. And the scene happens then, a few seconds after her remark. So either she actually saw the vid before me or guessed the moment based on what was being shown in the vid. We chalked that up to either her watching it a day prior, just after it got uploaded and forgetting about it, or an actual harmless glitch. I actually believe in glitches, kind of in a Pratchett-esque manner of things just happen. What the hell? Story 10. I remember being pretty young, like 9 or 10, and I was the car park of a pub in England, South End. I remember seeing someone in their teens in the window of a house looking over the car park. They waved at me, and I felt like I knew them somehow. My parents asked who I was waving at, and I said, just some lady in the window over there. Didn't think much of it. Fast forward 10 years. I was at my nan's new house. I remember walking into her room, which I never was allowed to do, going to the window. I then realized I was in the house looking over that same parking lot and remembering that interaction years before. Then a girl around 9 or 10 who was in said car park waved at me, and I waved back. I felt like I knew her, could not explain it, and have never told anyone about it. It freaked me out. Story 11. My dad's story. So we spent a lot of time growing up by a local creek fishing in my family. My brother and dad were all alone in a meadow around the end of summer, and my brother looks at him and says, "Do you remember when I was big and you were little?" Keep in my mind, my brother doesn't talk much at all, and he would be about 4. My dad was obviously creeped out, but was like, "What, buddy?" And my brother said, "When I was big and you were little," and wouldn't elaborate further. My brother has no clue what he was talking about, but apparently we all had a moment like that, all alone with parents asking if they remember when we were big and they were little. Story 12. I don't personally remember this, but I would see my dead grandfather all the time when I was a kid. From the ages of 7 to 9, there was probably 10 different incidents. My dad was an absolute pansy when it came to ghosts, which I don't really believe in, and wanted to take me to the doctor. My dad had one of those bathrooms with a separate toilet room, and no one that lived in the house closed the bathroom door unless they were bathing. I was playing RuneScape and my dad asked why the bathroom door was closed. And I said it's because Grandpa's in there. That's the only one I actually remember. There was maybe 2 other bathroom incidents and some incidents when I would sit on the floor and watch TV with my dad, and he would tell me to go sit in the vault, what was once my grandfather's chair, and said I couldn't because Grandpa was sleeping. I don't know how creepy these are, to be honest, but they freaked out my family for sure. Answer. After my granddad passed, the next my whole family was hanging out in his living room with my grandma. He was known for pranks, fun tricks, and joking around. As we were sitting around, we would all feel like a tickle on our foot or on our ear or a tug on our shirt. Just a bunch of things he would do to catch you off guard. Even though I was just a kid, I remember everyone getting creeped out because it was like he was just walking around the living room and doing it to everyone. Maybe everyone else was pretending it was happening, and I just thought it was happening to me too. But it just seemed really weird of a thing to coordinate with each other just to potentially make my brother and I believe he was still here and that we get to stay here after we die. Story 13. I was on vacation on Florida visiting a friend. We were walking on the beach on a perfectly sunny day when everything went black for a second. I think it was weird, but explained it away, thinking that my eyes were playing tricks on me until he looked at me and said, "Did everything go black for a second?" Story 14. I always have weird visions, or see something in a dream, but I won't notice that I've seen it. Then like a week or so after, I'll see the exact same thing, almost like deja vu, but not quite since it hasn't actually happened before. It would always be something so specific and it has happened multiple times, so it can't just be a strange coincidence. Edit. It's very reassuring to see all the stories of people experiencing the same thing. Assures me that I'm not going insane, or maybe many others are just going insane with me. I won't be able to read them all as my phone's been blown up with them, but I'll try my best. Story 15. So this has always bothered me. I was 13 years old at the time and my dad was a coal miner. He worked third shift, known as the hoot owl shift, which was midnight to noon. As such, he got home around 2 p.m. and slept till around 9. Got up, had dinner with us, and left for work. My dad was always pretty gruff and constantly yelled at us if my younger brother or I made too much noise and woke him up after getting home from somewhere, which as an adult now I completely understand. So one day I did something to wake him up. I forget what. Anyways, he calls me back to the bedroom, and I'm expecting to get a dressing down, but he just looked at me and said, "It's okay. Come over here and give me a hug." What 13-year-old boy wants to hug their dad? I kind of squirmed a bit, and he followed up with, "What if something happened to me?" and just laid there all grizzled and tired. I didn't hug him. That night there was an accident in the mine. He saved everyone on his crew, including the one person he went back in for. His was the only passing, and I'm convinced he knew it was going to happen. I'll never forget his eyes that day. If someone asked you for a hug, give it to them. I love you, Dad. Eat it. My very first gold. I'm so glad this resonated with someone. Second edit. This obviously resonated with more than one person. Words can't express how much I appreciate it. Thank you to everyone that shared their own stories of loss. I'm trying to read them all. If I miss one, I'm sorry. Thank you for sharing your story. Answer. My grandfather was a railroad worker. He and my grandmother lived within a close walk of the rail yard. My grandmother said one day that he said she should not leave his dinner out like she did every night. He walked to the end of their sidewalk, then stopped and took a long look at her. She says it felt like he was truly taking her in, looked her head to toe. He dropped dead less than an hour later at work, stood up to throw away an orange peel and just fell over, dead before he hit the ground. My grandmother is convinced he knew that would be the last time he saw her. Story 16. 3 times in the last year, I have had a strong feeling to comment to someone about a part of their body. I've not done so because A, there are people I don't see often, and B, it would be weird. But a few weeks after each one of those people were diagnosed with cancer in the part of the body I felt I needed to comment on. If I get that feeling again, don't care who it is, I'm going to say something. Answer. I can't speak to the scientific validity of your case, but I do know of one example of a person being able to identify disease to a rather strong degree of accuracy. This woman is currently assisting in research to determine what biomarkers she can detect that indicate that a person has Parkinson's disease. She is so accurate that during a study to see how well she could differentiate Parkinson's patients from non-Parkinson's patients, out of the 12 shirts that were taken from 6 people with Parkinson's and 6 without, she labeled 1112 correctly, according to the records of the people who were used in the study. The single sample that she got wrong was a member of the control group for the test, and she had insisted that this person had Parkinson's. 8 months later, this patient informed the people conducting the study that they were diagnosed with Parkinson's. So in reality, she had correctly diagnosed all 12 people by simply smelling a t-shirt they had worn for a day, and even was capable of diagnosing someone before a medical professional had done so. Such stories make you think about biological intuition. It's hard to say if it was a coincidence or some kind of sixth sense, but the author clearly doesn't intend to ignore such signals in the future. A rather specific and useful gift, if you can call it that. Story 17. I remember driving my car to this intersection in this rural area, and I'm checking both sides because of terrible blind spots. In the corner of my eye, my mother is sitting there and says something like, "It's all clear my way." I look back and she isn't there. My mother had been dead for a few years at this point. This was also in the middle of the day, and I've never had it happen since. Edit. Wow, my first award. Thanks. Answer. It's weird how that works. Mine isn't weird so much as just uncanny. My mom passed away and had been gone for about 2 years before this happened. I was walking along in a grocery store with the wife and kids. There was a little old woman with both her arms folded over the handle to a shopping cart, hunched over and pushing it along, wearing a blue fleece jacket, wearing a fake hair extension clip in the exact same hair color and style that my mom had used to. She wore similar glasses and had a very similar body shape. I broke. I told my wife I wanted to check something and had to walk past that woman, to see her face, to know it couldn't possibly be my mom. Every fiber of my being knew it wasn't her. I had seen her after she had passed, held her cold hands after she had passed. After I walked past that woman, I couldn't help but move to a quiet part of the store and try to hide the tears. I missed my mom, and in that moment had all those memories and emotion hit me all at once. Story 18. A friend and I went to a buddy's house for a day party, stayed up playing Halo 2 and hanging out. We all crashed in the basement. Our friend who came with me and I got up at the same time. Not like one after each other, we both got up at the same time after being asleep for a few hours and rushed to the bathroom. R was more athletic than me, probably still is, and beat me there. I ran upstairs, barely getting my head over the toilet before puking my guts out. R was doing the same thing in the basement. I was wearing a wooden cross my grandmother mailed me from Romania. I'm not religious, but I appreciated the gift as I had never met her at that point. Cross somehow became detached from the cord, fell on the tile, and broke into 2 pieces. So we both call our respective mothers and get picked up. By now it's like 3 to 4 a.m. Felt sick up until we left the house. Once I was in the car, and a few blocks away, felt perfectly fine. R reported the same thing to me that day over MSN Messenger. Felt perfectly fine after a few blocks. Got the pictures developed a few weeks later. There's a picture of us on the couch rocking some Halo, and the whole room looks like it's filled with mist. Super spooky. I've been looking for the pic for a long time, and I can't seem to find it anymore. But every few years, my sister and I search my mom's photo albums for it. Story 19. It's an odd thing where people close to me talk about things I was previously thinking of before I see them. Answer, holy shoot, same. Especially lately, I've noticed I'll be thinking about something for a little while, and then right before I'm about to mention it, my boyfriend will say something almost exact to what I had been thinking about. It's to the point where I'm starting to look at him suspiciously because, how the fudge? Can you just coincidentally say every single thing I'm thinking about or about to say? This many times, LOL. Story 20. The entire world have slowed down for me a couple of times in my life. My best guess is some kind of adrenaline spike causing my brain to go into overdrive. Answer. This has happened to me too. First time I was about 12. Family and I were in the woods because my uncle was camping. I brought a friend of the same age and my cousin was there too, just a few years older. We were playing baseball with an old can we found. I pitched it to my friend, head the clink, and turned my head to see where it landed. Didn't see it, so I turned back to my friend just in time to see the can come right at my face. I have a small crescent scar on my chin now. The other one was my first car wreck. I was driving around a mountain pass in Montana. Clear skies, beautiful July day. I was in the left lane going 78 miles per hour in a 75 zone with a slight downhill incline. Not sure what, why or how, but suddenly my arms ever so slightly twitched to the right and my car went flying. Did a full 360, hit the guardrail head on at a 90-degree turn. Before hitting it, I remember thinking, what the hell did I just do to myself? While the car was still spinning. Got really bad whiplash. I'm still dealing with 7 years later. Seems like for me, any trauma plays in slow motion for me to fully absorb all details to replay later. Edit, wow, 1,000 upvotes and a silver? Thank you, everyone. Story 21. I should have fallen into the River Thames once. Me and some friends from uni were exploring London and taking pictures beside the Thames when I decide posing next to the wall is a weak photo, so decide to climb up for better photo opportunities. As I hoisted myself up, I must have used far too much power and knew fully I was about to go straight over and into the river, which was like a 20-foot drop. I managed to get 1 foot onto the wall and felt something completely stop my momentum. Almost felt like divine intervention in a way. I stood up straight, alive, and still on dry land. As I turned to express how close I was to dying there, and then someone took a photo of me, which is still one of the best photos I've had taken of me to date. Story 22. I've told this story before and could go into a ton of detail, but here's the short version. I am 100 sure I vividly remember a dog that apparently doesn't exist. When I was 16, we lived on the other side of the province and my uncle had this little Jack Russell named Crew. Crew went missing for several months and then turned up at a humane society over an hour away, and we were all shocked this little dog has made it so far. Anyway, that was almost 20 years ago, and the other day I was talking to my parents and was like, whenever I hear about Jack Russells, I think about Crew and that stunt he pulled, and they had no idea what I was talking about. Insisted my uncle had never had such a dog, I must have dreamed it, etc. Honestly, anyone else who would have remembered this dog has been dead for a long time, and I don't even have any pictures of my uncle. I have absolutely no way to prove this dog existed, but I'm sure that he did. Story 23. When I was in high school, I remember reading a question on a test, thinking to myself, why do I already know the exact numeric answer? I'm not even done reading it. Thinking on it for a brief moment, I realized I had literally dreamt this exact question, word for word, the night before. Only time it's ever happened to me, but to my grave, I will swear that it did. Got it right, by the way. Story 24. My friend Sarah was in a nightclub, tipsy off her face, when she got an overwhelming urge to tell a total stranger that her leg hurts. Edit, it didn't. All a bit strange, she ignores it, but it doesn't stop, so she walks up to this guy and says, I know this is crazy, but I've got a huge urge to tell you my leg hurts. I know that's crazy again. Sorry, but he bursts into tears. Turns out his dad had just died, and they made a pact before that if there was an afterlife, he would get a message to him saying a totally random phrase, so there could be no mistakes, which they decided was, I've hurt my leg. Answer, my mom had a similar experience. Her mom passed away 28 years ago. On the 20th anniversary of her passing, my mom was at work as an assistant preschool teacher. During free time, the main teacher got up from the group of children she was with, went to the whiteboard and wrote, Mom says hi. It didn't have anything to do with what the teacher was talking about with the kids. And they never really wrote on the whiteboard during free time, unless it was to explain something to a kid. At break, she asked her teacher why she did that, and the teacher responded that she just felt like she had to. My mom got home that night and told me and my dad about it. A few weeks later, she was on the phone with her older sister. Without my mom prompting, my aunt tells my mom about a weird encounter on the anniversary of their mom's passing. My aunt was a manager of a local substances store chain and was stocking shelves when a middle-aged man that she didn't know came up to her and told her that he felt like he needed to tell her Mom Says Hi. Because both of them had that experience, they probed their other siblings. Out of the four other siblings, one brother and one other sister noticed Mom Says Hi on that day. The other brother is a severe alcoholic who can't remember anything, and the other sister has her heads constantly in the clouds. That is brushed off my mom telling her that my mom had breast cancer, and then Aunt later said something along the lines of, would have been nice to know beforehand. I had always been agnostic-leaning atheist before that, but that experience definitely pushed me towards agnostic non-religious, but believing there is an afterlife more than this life. It's hard to find a logical explanation for how a complete stranger could come out with such a personal and specific phrase. This is one of those moments that either makes you believe in life after death or that the world is much more complex than it seems. Story 25. One day when I was about 8, I didn't go to school because I was sick. My friend was supposed to bring me homework, etc., but he never came. My granddad came home from work and he told me that that friend was dead. I was devastated. That night I had a dream. I was with my friend at a playground next to our school and we were talking. Then he told me that he is safe and it didn't hurt when that car hit him. The next day my mother wanted to talk to me about that situation and she asked me if I wanted to know what happened. I told her that I know everything because my friend told me. She thought that my granddad told me, but he did not. He said that he did not want to tell me without her knowing it. That night I had a dream again and I was talking to him again. We were playing and having fun and he told me that he really had to go and we won't see each other ever again. The next day was his funeral and I really haven't had a dream about him ever since. Answer: my daughter had an incredibly similar dream the night her best friend passed away. Her dream had her playing with friends in the enclosed play area of the nearby rec where they hung out usually. Her friend called to her from the path just outside of the play area, beckoning her to come over. My daughter called back to her ecstatically to come and play, but her friend shook her head and said that she couldn't because she had to go soon. So my daughter ran over to her and they hugged. Her friend told her that, like your friend, she was safe and that it hadn't hurt when she died. She also told her that my daughter shouldn't be sad because she was happy and okay. They then hugged again and said goodbye before her friend walked away down the path. I chalked this up to some kind of psychological coping mechanism in dream form. That is until a few hours later, my daughter told me that her other friend had had a dream exactly the same as hers. I still tell myself it was a coincidence, but I have that seed in my mind that there may have been more to it than that. Story 26. This happened around 1991. It's the middle of the night. I'm standing in my sister's living room, and it must be a full moon, because even though it's around 1 a.m. and the lights are off, I can see clearly. There's a mixing bowl with popcorn kernels in the bottom on the floor in front of the TV, and some rental VHS in a pile nearby. I hear a noise and turn around to see my sister's normally very friendly Labrador retriever looking like Cujo. Fangs bared, snarling, hackles raised. Suddenly there's a bright flash of light and I wake up like I hit the bed from a great height. I think that was a weird dream. Eventually, I fall back to sleep, and in the morning, I call my sister, planning to tell her the story, but she preempts me by telling me about the weird thing that happened in the night. They woke up to the sound of the king snarling at about 1 a.m. Her husband thought there was a prowler in the house, got a gun, and went to find the dog. She was standing in the living room, snarling at the middle of the room. He couldn't see anyone, so he flipped on the light. No one was there. The dog instantly stopped snarling and walked to her bed like nothing had happened. He checked the property and went back to bed. We talked a bit, and I found out they watched some rental movies, and of course we had popcorn. Why? My sister is a little woo-woo at times, so I decided not to tell her about my night. She lived about 450 miles away, by the way. Edit, punctuation. Answer, I'm a little late to the party, so I DK if anyone will see this. But I've had something similar happen super recent. Every couple Sundays I go to my uncle's house with my mom and have coffee with him and my aunt. A couple weeks ago, I had a dream that I appeared outside his house, in his driveway. I let myself in the house and sat down in his chair in the living room. It was so vivid. He walked into the living room and was surprised to see me. He asked if it was really me there. I told him, yep, just stopping by to hang out. I then complimented him on his new television and the new desktop on which he set it up. That's when I woke up. I told my mom about this and she was shocked. She asked how I knew he had a new TV and new desk. She hadn't told me a thing about it. That Sunday I went over his house, and sure as shoot, the new setup in his living room was the same down to every last detail. His greeting to me was, "I knew you'd be coming today," but he had no idea about my dream. My mom's theory is that I astral projected. I get shivers every time I think about it. Astral projection or just an incredibly detailed dream. In any case, learning about the purchases and interior of someone else's house without leaving your room is an experience you can't just forget. It seems our consciousness sometimes travels separately from us. Story 27. Once when we were kids, I had some friends with an Ouija board at the basement of the building where I lived. Through the stairs, there was an elevator shaft that had these wide bars where you could stick your arm in them. Typical old elevator design. So one night, they decided to go to the basement to do another Ouija session, and I decided to drop a cup of glass through the shaft just to scare them off. I let go of the cup, saw it vanish into the darkness, and I never heard the cup hit the ground. I stood there confused. Next day, I went downstairs at the basement with one of my friends, and the cup was there, placed in the middle of the elevator shaft floor. The cup was upright and intact. I was seriously freaked out by that, because it would be impossible to someone enter the elevator shaft and place the cup there like that. The cup should have broken into pieces since I threw it from the 10th floor against a cement floor. Story 28. About a year ago, me and my cousin visited Los Angeles. We were driving around using Google Maps, and after missing our third or fourth exit, we swear we both heard it sigh loudly before it rerouted us. We freaked out and made sure our driving was on point the rest of the ride. The rest of the trip there, if we missed any of our exits or turns, we always apologized to Google, so hopefully she would know we were just morons and not assholes. Story 29. This didn't happen to me, but to my mother and aunt when they were younger, and to this day is the creepiest thing I've ever heard. So one day when they were around 16 years old, they were alone in the house for a couple of hours while their mother was out working. I don't remember exactly which one of them noticed this, but one of them walked into the kitchen and was shocked to find that the stove had somehow been ripped open all the way into the oven. My mother described it as if someone had stabbed the top of the oven, slashed it, and then pulled that slash open with their hands. Both of them saw it, and when I asked my aunt about this story, she gave me the same description. Also, this was definitely not a visual hallucination because they swear they reached with their hand from inside the oven to the top through the hole. They both swear they were sober at the time, and I believe them because they were raised in an extremely religious environment, so it's impossible they were tipsy or high. When my grandmother got home, they naturally went to show her the slash, only to find it was completely gone. The stove was completely normal, and there was no sign of a hole ever being there. This experience is probably the only reason why I'm not completely skeptical about the supernatural. I've got other personal experiences of this sort, but they all can be explained rationally one way or another in a way that makes complete sense. But this story is way beyond me. Story 30. My wife passed away a year ago today. Had some odd things happen, like a couple of old meaningful pictures show up that I swore were in storage. The strangest one was, I vacuumed the carpet, and as soon as I was done, a diamond ring was on the ground right where I had just cleaned. It was like she was saying, "Hey, this one is real. Don't lose it." Answer: I'm sorry for your loss. Hugs. Similar story, but kind of funny. My father disliked spiders, absolutely disliked them. So of course I had a pet tarantula, Missy. I got Missy when I was 3. My father died when I was 17. Exactly 1 year later, on the anniversary of his passing, Missy died. We joked that he came back as a ghost just to eliminate that darn spider. LOL. Story 31. Several years ago, I went home, turned on my PC, browsed the web for a bit, literally watched a video about the Matrix, then looked out of my window. Then I suddenly snapped awake sitting in my chair. I looked at my monitor to see that it had turned off. I thought, strange, I must have fallen asleep, and proceeded to move the mouse to wake my PC from sleep mode. It did not wake up. I was confused until I noticed that the power strip was not even plugged in. It had never been turned on in the first place. That one weirded me out for quite a while. I must have gone home, fell asleep, and dreamt the whole thing. At least I hope so. Edit. Small clarification. Edit 2. Added a T that changes the tone drastically. Nice theory though, y'all anonymous horror. Story 32. When I was 5, I was sitting and watching my dad cook. Everything went white for what seemed like a minute, and then back to normal. Still sitting upright, my dad's still cooking in the kitchen. For years, I was convinced I had been abducted by aliens. Of course, 10 years later, I was diagnosed with epilepsy, so it was probably just a seizure. I guess what I'm getting at is that any unwilling lapses of consciousness feel kind of like the world shoot the bed for a moment. Story 33. I have a good one. I was about 12 years old and woke up in the middle of the night needing to take a leak. I walked across the hall to the little bathroom, hit the lights, and was about to reach for the toilet when I glanced up and saw a face in the mirror. It was not my face. It was as if someone was on the other side, standing to the right, with their face right next to the glass, staring at me. I only saw it for the briefest moment, but it is seared into my brain. I screamed and ran out of there to find my dad. Of course, my dad investigated, then calmed me down, or tried to. Eventually, we had a prayer session because I was so freaked out. Eventually, I must have gone back to sleep. Fast forward to my 30s. I'd forgotten all about the event. One night while visiting, my dad quietly brings it up. Remember that one time you saw a face in the mirror? It suddenly came back to me in a rush of memory, sending a chill down my spine. Yeah, I remember. Well, he said, I sometimes think about that night. He looked down at the floor with a serious expression. I saw it too. He went on to describe exactly what he'd seen. We have no idea what that was. Apparently, when he investigated, he saw it and had a freak out of his own. Apparently, the prayer session was as much for his own nerves as mine. I respect him for keeping that tidbit from me till my 30s, but I kind of wish he'd never told me. Answer, I have a similar story. My dad was Army and we lived in Germany when I was younger. The house we lived in Wiesbaden had all kinds of unexplained stuff going on. My little brother, who was 7 to 9 at the time, wakes up screaming bloody takedown, wakes the whole house. He says he saw a shadowy figure with chains at the foot of his bed and describes the feeling he got from it as pure hatred. My dad bursts in the room, turns on the light, and spends the next hour or so comforting my brother. Years later, while we're all having a few drinks and talking about that house, the story gets brought up. My dad then admits that in that second before he turned on the light, he saw the exact same thing. He said he also felt that dislike feeling too. Something bad either happened in that house or lived there, and for 2 years we got to share it with something. Story 34. For obvious reasons, I always keep a reverse UNO card in my pocket, a blue reverse UNO card, which I once found on my nightstand. Anyways, I had accidentally washed it with my pants. It was destroyed. The next day after waking up, guess what I found on my nightstand? A blue UNO reverse card. Story 35. Every night I go to bed about 2 hours before my husband. I always wake up when he comes into the room. One night he was gaming with a friend, and it was hours later I heard him sneak into the room and crawl across the floor so he could pop up and scare me. I felt the floor kind of shake and felt him bump clumsily against the side of the bed in the dark. I held out my hand and asked him not to scare me. I was already scared enough and begged him to just take my hand and come to bed. I couldn't see anything in the room but knew he was there and just waited for him to jump up so I could move on and go back to sleep. That's when I heard him talking to his friend in the other room. I was frozen. I know there's sleep paralysis or lucid dreaming or something that explains this, but I would have sworn on my son's life that someone had crawled across the floor and jostled the bed. Eventually, I worked out of the fear enough to grab my phone and text my husband to come in and turn on the lights and check under the bed. But holy shoot, it boggles me how real it felt. ETA, thank you for the silver. It's my first. Thank you to everyone who's confirmed sleep paralysis. Kind of comforting to have that as the answer. Maybe if it happens again, that knowledge will help. Also, it was likely inspired by watching Markiplier play Don't Open Your Eyes. Sleep with your doors shut, kids. You'll thank me later. 3 scary games, 36. Story 36. I used to have a recurring dream as a teenager every night for months. I was sitting at a table on the patio of a restaurant. I was out there alone, waiting for my food. A homeless man comes up to the other side of the patio and asks for change. I'm digging in my wallet for a couple dollars, and then I hear tires screech and look up to see a crash in an intersection near the restaurant. I run out there to see if I can help, and as I run out into the road, I get hit by a car and wake up at the impact. After a while, the dream stopped, and I put it out of my mind. Fast forward to me being 28 and sitting at an On the Border, on the patio waiting for my food. A homeless guy comes walking past the restaurant, but doesn't stop and ask for change. It makes me think about that dream, though, and I start to feel uneasy. Shortly after, I hear the tires screech, and I see a wreck happen in the intersection near the restaurant. I begin to run out there, but stop at the sidewalk and look out towards incoming traffic, and there is an SUV not slowing down. She was on her phone and blew through the intersection, completely unaware of what had just happened. Ran out and checked on the people. Everyone was fine. Story 37. I once clocked out of work at 6 p.m. like I always did at the time and began my hour-long train ride home. After I had found a seat, I went to sleep and woke up just before my station. From the station, it is a short bus journey, 10 to 15 minutes, to reach home. During the entire journey, I didn't use my phone and I don't wear a watch, so I didn't really notice the time anywhere. When I reached home, my family surprised me with, "You're home early? Everything all right?" I look at the wall clock and it is about to be 6 p.m. I was too shocked to understand what happened. Checked other watches, cell phones, etc., and the time is absolutely right. A few days later, the admin emailed us the timesheets for the month, times clocking in and out, and every single days for me was around the same 6 p.m. So it certainly wasn't me having left work earlier. To this date, I haven't figured out how I gained between 60 to 90 minutes that day. Edit 1. Wow. Thank you for the Pirate Silver Mateys. This is most popular comment ever. Gained an hour or so, and some karma to go with it. Edit 2. The most common theory in comments seems to be the DST, and I have considered it before. The problem is that it should work for both time in and time out. And if I remember, the time in was the same as always, and I didn't leave my home early for work. If I remember right, it also wasn't a Monday, which is when the clock reset effects come through at work despite the changes going in on Sunday. Story 38. Two things. Each was witnessed by at least one other person, and both were while driving. Once at a stop sign in a neighborhood. All of these little sparkles started swirling around in midair roughly 3 to 4 feet off the ground out of nowhere. The group of them were roughly 2 feet wide by 3 to 4 feet tall. It lasted 3 to 5 seconds, and then they were gone. No one was around, and when I asked my passenger if he saw it too, he breathed a sigh of relief and said yes. We spoke about it a little more, but there is no reasonable explanation. The second happened when myself and 3 friends were driving down an empty country road. Very straight stretch. A man on a bike appeared. Someone said to watch out for him so not to hit him, and then he disappeared. Our minds were blown, to say the least. Just poof, and he's gone. Answer: I've had something similar to the man on the bike thing. No substances, etc., well rested, etc. Driving down a road where you can clearly see everything, no places to hide and jump out, etc. No hills curves that could hide a person. I am an extremely alert driver and was speeding, so I was paying attention. Scan the road ahead, check rear mirror, check right mirror, road ahead, check left mirror, scan the road ahead. Repeat basically until I decide to look at the view to the left for like 1 second. Probably less. Look back to the road ahead. This person, it's walking along the road away from me. I immediately got chills and was legit scared. They were not close yet, no danger of hitting them. What scared me is they literally just appeared, and my lizard brain was saying, something is very off about them. I went past them and wanted to look in the mirror to see this thing. I couldn't though, because I was afraid of what I would see or what would happen, which is not like me. It was really weird. Recurring dreams are often considered the work of the subconscious. But when they begin to overlap with reality years later, it gets creepy. It's like a warning the brain is trying to decode in advance to avoid a fatal outcome. Story 39. About 2 years ago, I went to collect my husband from the ferry after work. My husband got into the car, and as I was driving very slowly out of the car park, we both noticed 2 people standing a few meters in front of our car. It looked as though they were strangers, older-looking professionals, both walking to their separate cars in different areas of the car park. The man was reaching into his side bag, and the lady was further ahead than the man, with her head turned to the right. I know the exact positions they were in because they were completely frozen on the spot. My husband and I sat there watching the frozen strangers, not saying anything to each other, and then all of a sudden it was like someone pressed play, and the 2 strangers just continued on like nothing had happened. My husband and I promised to each other that we would never forget how weird the experience was. I can't remember exactly how long they stayed frozen like that, but it was long enough to freak us both out. Story 40. When I was living with my parents, my dad was cleaning out one of his drawers and found a piece of paper with a postcode for a nearby city on. When he showed me, I immediately recognized it as my own handwriting, except I have no memory of ever writing out this postcode. So I punched the postcode into maps to find it as a random street I have never visited before, and I have no reason to visit it. I wish I had have gone. Maybe the universe was trying to show me something. Story 41. Not me, but a buddy of mine. We were playing Xbox, and we both have Elite controllers which have magnetic joysticks that pop right off so you can switch to another. Well, he tossed his on his bed and went to the bathroom. He came back to find his right joystick missing. I let him use mine because I prefer the longer ones. During the summer, he texted me saying he found it at his dad's house, 150 miles away from where he regularly hangs his hat, his mom's house. Story 42. So this might be hard to explain. I was probably 12 and lived in a big log cabin. One day while my parents were at work, I got in a fight with my brother, 18, who had some anger issues. He chased me through the house, and I ran out one door, around our porch, and in through another door. I was going to lock it behind me, but didn't have time because he was too close behind me. So I slammed the door behind me and kept running. When I glanced back to see if he had made it through the door yet, he was banging on the window of said door and yelling for me to unlock it. The door was locked, and there was no he had locked it, because the door could only be locked from the outside with a key, of course, and our parents never gave us keys. There was also no way the door could have accidentally locked when I slammed it behind me, because it needed to be fully turned to lock, and usually required some finagling at the end to make it actually lock. I stood there dumbfounded for a few seconds, and then ran to a bathroom and locked myself in there. Definitely feel that saved me that day. Edit. The door only had a deadbolt, which could only be locked from the outside with a key, but from the inside you had to turn the knob. Suppose I worded that in a confusing way. Answer, I had a similar situation. One day me and my two brothers were helping my dad clean the house. We were sweeping, dusting, washing the dishes, the everyday cleaning stuff. My dad goes to the garage, and as he goes inside, we hear the door to get in the garage lock as he enters. A few minutes pass by, and we hear our dad start banging the door and screaming, saying who locked the door and that it wasn't funny. But we were all in the living. As I go to unlock it, my dad just comes out furious, saying that wasn't funny, but I look at him with a confused look and told him we were all in the living room, and we never moved from there. Story 43. I was walking my dog, and I was almost to the driveway when I looked down for some reason, and I looked back up, and I ended up being back at the road about 6 blocks away and from where I thought I was. I was so confused, but my dog looked completely fine. FYI, I don't drink or do substances. I'm still pretty young. Story 44. I have a jade Buddhist necklace I bought in China about 10 years ago. It disappears for months at a time, only to reappear somewhere obvious like my desk, my dresser, in a drawer I use every day. I just say it goes on a trip and will come back eventually. Answer, one night more than a decade ago, as teenagers, my friends and I were delinquenting outside of a museum. In the grass outside of the museum, I found a Taoist feng shui compass used for fortune telling and the like. I've had it ever since, but it fudge disappears, like regularly. I've lost it for months at a time before. It's at the point now that when it disappears, I'm fine with it. I just say something like, hey, it always comes back. And then I find it under a couch cushion or somewhere else it has no business being. It's very strange. To be honest though, since I moved into my current house, it hasn't moved. Maybe decided its exploring days are behind it and it's just time to settle down. Edit. I love that my most upvoted comment is about that fucking thing. In some weird way, it kind of figures. For anybody curious what it looks like, Google Lupin Compass. That's what it is. Story 45. My wife and I were at the local mall shopping. We were walking around in Spencer's, and there was a display with a bunch of sexy, slutty boxed outfits. Once we saw them, we both blurted out, "This looks like something Samantha," an acquaintance we both knew from mutual friends, would wear at the exact same time. We started laughing about it, and as we walked around the corner, the Samantha we were talking about was looking at the exact same rack but from the other side. We were both like, what in the fudge? We hadn't seen her in probably a year or so before then. That left everyone scratching their heads for a bit. Things that appear out of nowhere or survive multiple washes only to be found at the right moment always raise questions. You can believe in coincidence, or you can believe that we are sometimes helped to find important clues when we need them most. Story 46. I was driving about 50 miles per hour, and a car ran a stop sign on an on-ramp and pulled out right in front of me. I remember bracing for impact, and then I was about 300 yards down the highway, and I saw the car at the ramp in my rear view just about to pull out. Answer, I was driving during a snowstorm when a police car started driving next to me, lights on, no sirens. I looked at the officers, but they didn't look at me. They had a weird look on their face. Something was off. They accelerated just a little to pass me and then completely disappeared. I drove maybe 15 minutes on the road without seeing them anywhere. They couldn't have gone really far. The road's conditions were terrible. I was creeped out for a long time. Story 47. I've told this story before. 3 years ago, my childhood dog died very suddenly and unexpectedly. She was sick for a few days, but turned it around and got better before dying very quickly and painfully in my dad's arms. I live out of state, so I wasn't able to be there for any of it. It's a 6-hour drive, and I felt very, very guilty about her passing without me there. I had a very deep connection to her, and she had been my best friend for 12 years. I was devastated by her passing. I couldn't work or eat or do much of anything. I was constantly bursting into tears. It was just awful. My heart just ached, and I found myself apologizing to her for not being there. I just felt so guilty. One night, I had a dream about her. I dreamt I was in this empty space, and Charlie came running up to me, whimpering excitedly. She was licking my face and generally just freaking out, and I was sobbing. I knew she was dead, and I knew she was visiting me in my dream. I was very aware of it all. I kept hugging her and crying and apologizing, and she just kept licking my face and being affectionate. I woke up with tears streaming down my face and sat up in bed. I could still smell her distinctive smell, and on my sleeve, I pulled off one of her hairs. She had never been to my apartment, and I hadn't seen her recently. It wasn't a cat hair, either, as Charlie was a collie mix, and their fur pattern is very distinctive. It may all be coincidence, but it was so vivid and real. I like to think she was visiting to let me know everything is okay and to not worry. I haven't had a dream like that since. Story 48. Might get buried, but oh well. When I played baseball as a kid, they were handing out the trophies at the end of the season. They called out the names of the kids while we received our trophies. There happened to be a kid with the same name as me. We met after the ceremony because it was weird since our last name isn't a very common one. We had the same birthday and everything. We looked alike. Both our dads were named Derek, and both of our sisters were named Lily. As a kid, I found it cool. As an adult, I find it cool and also disturbing. Answer. Reading this reminded me of something kind of crazy. Probably should have thought about it when I searched for the figurehead title, but it took your baseball comment. So about 10 years ago, my dad was at a minor league baseball game in Greenville, South Carolina, where we lived at the time, wearing a glove with our uncommon last name written on the side. A dude a few rows down is like, "What's up with your glove?" That's my last name. My dad thought he was fudge around, but he pulled out his ID and same last name. Long story short, turned out to be my dad's half-cousin. His grandpa was my dad's grandpa, and that's how we found out about my great-grandpa's secret family. The affair's secret family started 2 generations prior in Pottsville, Pennsylvania, and ends up being discovered because 2 of the half-cousins happened to be sitting close to each other at a minor league baseball game in Greenville, SC, decades later. The half-cousin and his wife and kids lived about a mile down the road from us. This was right before the genealogy stuff got popular online. So one of my uncles made up some story about having a genetic disorder to try and get some records from some agency so we could piece everything together. Good times. Story 49. I was working on my motorcycle in a dirt lot where I had crashed it trying to do a sick drift, breaking off the clutch lever in the gear shifter. I had brought a wrench set with me, and I was using one of them to take off a bolt when I put it down on the ground to finish unscrewing the bolt with my hand. 2 minutes later, I went to pick it back up, and it was gone. I ran all around this dirt lot looking for it to no avail. Luckily, I had a spare in the car. Fixed the bike and drove back to my apartment to shower as I was filthy. I walked in my room and sitting on my desk was the wrench. I was dumbfounded. Answer, this reminds me of when I was in dance as a little girl. I remember throwing my dance shoe over my shoulder as I was getting ready in my room. When I turned around to grab it, I couldn't find it anywhere. My mom and I searched for 10 minutes before we decided to leave without the shoe so we wouldn't be too late to practice. We found the slipper in my winter boot by the porch just as we were leaving, which was across the house from where I was when I tossed my slipper. Story 50. Weird but happy. About 5 years ago in November, we lost our family dog to cancer. She was the dog my children grew up with, loved by all. At the next Christmas, at the end of the day of gifts, food and family, as I was picking up, I found a tiny pewter dog figurine sitting on the mantel. I asked everyone who had been at the house that day if they left it. No one had. Okay, weird, but took it as a good omen. When my eldest went back to college at the end of that Christmas break, he asked if he could take the little figurine to remember his dog. Of course I said yes. A week or 2 later, picking up around the house, there was the figurine again. I called my son and said, "You forgot the dog figurine." He said, "No, I didn't. It's right in front of me on my desk." I had now found a second figurine. Again, no one claimed any knowledge of it. No idea how, but I still have the two of them tucked away on a shelf to this day. Answer. Kind of reminds me of a rescue cat, Millie, my family had when I was a teenager. Millie had a hard life before us and had some brain damage, so needed constant babying, including being supervised when playing outside. One day I was watching her play, and she came to sit on the arm of the bench next to me and sun herself for a while. It started to go dark, so I called Millie to follow me inside. And as she stood up, I saw this little metal thing that she had been sat on. I had a closer look, and it was a little silver angel charm. I thought it should belong to her as she had found it, so fastened it to her collar. That angel was with her on her collar until she passed last year. A while after she passed, my mom wanted to adopt another cat and was going through the old RSPCA files from her previous rescues when she came across Millie's file. It had all her details, markings, DOB, health conditions, and her previous name on the top of the page, Angel. The reason it's so weird is that the angel charm that Millie had seemingly fabricated out of nowhere when I had found it. It didn't belong to me or anyone we knew and was found under Millie in our securely enclosed back garden. Millie also had a particular hatred for Buddha, seeking out my mom's statues of him and throwing up on them, decapitating them, throwing them down the stairs and shattering them. But that's another story. Edit. A picture of the young lady in question with said angel charm on her collar. Apologize for the quality. It was circa 2010. Story 51. After my little brother's takedown the next morning, I was talking with a friend and he mentioned this other dude I went to high school with, younger brother, had died in a car accident a couple weeks before. Later that day, I pull out a slip of paper with this other dude's number and name on it from my pants. I vaguely remember running into him a year or so before this at a club where he gave me his number. I swear I had worn and washed these jeans at least a dozen times since I had run into this dude. I still makes no sense how that paper was there, and I only found it then. I called the dude and we talked a bunch. It really helped me deal with the situation. Story 52. When I was 14, 1995, during the eerie calm before a summer lightning storm, my dog Daisy, Chow Lab Mix, started barking at the corner of the basement. There was nothing to bark at, just stone fireplace and a tile floor. Suddenly, a lamp set above the fireplace had the light bulb explode and a painting hung next to it shattering as it flew off the wall at an almost 90-degree trajectory, landing 10 feet from the wall. My brother and I have theorized for years what it was. Our best guess is that lightning hit the chimney and that's what did the damage. We've never been able to figure out how our dog knew it was about to happen. Story 53. I shared this a few years ago when this question was asked last time and didn't really realize how glitchy in the matrix it was until people started commenting, haha. In college, I took a hard news, soft news journalism class where one of the assignments was to write an obituary for one of my grandparents. The professor told us to write it on a deceased grandparent, but if all of your grandparents were still alive, we had to choose one. In my case, all of my grandparents were alive, the Dahung. I procrastinated actually doing the assignment until the night before it was due because it seemed like a morbid assignment, especially once all of my grandparents were still alive. Scramming for an easy grandparent to write about, I gave my mom a call and asked her for some basic biographical information about my maternal grandfather. As we were talking about my grandpa's career, my mom couldn't recall the name of one of the companies he worked at. She lectured me about waiting until the last minute to write the assignment because it was late, 10:30 p.m. my grandpa's time. However, she said she would give him a call to see if he was still awake and be able to answer that question once my assignment was due the following morning. When my mom called my grandma answered the phone in a panic. My grandma frantically explained that the paramedics had just arrived and were performing CPR on my grandpa because he had stopped breathing and lost consciousness. My mom was able to stay on the phone with my grandma until they took my grandpa to the hospital, where he was declared dead. In the time my mom and I had been talking on the phone about my grandpa's obituary, he was dying. His passing was entirely unexpected at that. Although he was in his 80s, he was the healthiest of my grandparents at the time. We ended up using the obituary I wrote for that writing assignment as his actual obituary. Still freaks me out when I think about the timing. Answer: freaky. Reminds me a bit of this time when I was a kid. I had this little joke novelty thing I'd gotten at a magic shop while on vacation. This was actually so long ago I forget exactly what the thing was supposed to resemble. But it was something you were supposed to open, and it had this plastic thing inside suspended on a rubber band. You were supposed to wind this thing up and close it. You hand it to your victim's sucker friend. They open it, which releases tension, allowing the plastic thing to spin around, rattling loudly against the plastic case and vibrating in their hand, scaring the shoot out of them. Anyway, I got all my relatives with this thing because I was a funny little 10-year-old shoot. My great aunt and uncle were up visiting and staying at my grandparents' house. I had the thought to try this trick on my great aunt, but something stopped me. It didn't feel right, and I very clearly had the thought I don't want to give her a heart attack. No idea why. She was a bit older, but so were my grandparents, who I already tricked. Well, very shortly after they returned home, I get news that my great aunt has had a heart attack and passed away. Seemed like a spooky coincidence, so that one's always stuck with me. Intuition is a strange thing. Sometimes we make decisions without understanding the reasons, and only later realize that we saved someone's feelings or even their life. That internal stop signal worked exactly when it was truly necessary. Story 54. When I was a kid, I had a dream. A bunch of us kids were playing hide and seek near my house out in the snow. I started digging into the snow to hide and came across a dead girl. The very next day, I was walking home from school, and pretty much in the exact same area I dug in my dream, I saw the girl. Same hair, same face, same jacket. I was across the street, but I kept staring at her while walking. She eventually noticed and I ran off. Never saw her again. Was the weirdest thing ever. Story 55. I was reading Kurt Vonnegut's last book, Timequake, and had put it in my backpack to read while on the bus. I left the house, and for some reason about a block later, I thought to myself, did I put the book in my bag? I looked and it wasn't there. Went back to the house and couldn't find it. Retraced my steps to where I turned around and it was nowhere to be found. I never found the book again and gave up on trying to get another copy. I think it was Vonnegut's way of telling me it wasn't worth the read. Story 56, 1985. My ex-wife and I were sleeping. There was a small sliver of light coming in through the window from a street light, so the room and bed were dimly visible. Our black Pomeranian was at the end of the bed asleep. I dreamt that I woke up, reached down to pet him, and he turned into a glossy black bivalve oyster thing, which opened up to reveal rows of gleaming glass teeth. I woke up to my ex backpedaling up the bed over the pillows towards the wall. I asked, "What's wrong?" She said, "What is that shiny black clam thing with the teeth at the end of the bed? Where's the dog?" We had had the same nightmare at the same time. This still gives me a chill. Answer: I was once chilling at my ex's house in his room, sitting on my phone while he was napping on his stomach with his face in his pillow. He jumped up, suddenly yelling, "Ah!" He said in his dream a wasp was trying to sting him. A couple hours later, I picked up the pillows, straightening the bed, and there was a dead wasp under the one he was using, and it looked like it had been there a while because it was part disintegrated. Very weird. Story 57. My sister pretended to feed my bear when we were kids. I saw the beans on the spoon. She put it to his mouth and scooped, showed me the spoon, and the beans were gone. No beans on his lip, nothing, like he actually ate it. She never told me how she did it, and she doesn't remember doing it now. Answer: are these real beans you're talking about? I remember there used to be a doll years and years ago that came with a spoon that you could feed it peas. The peas would be in the spoon, but when you bring it to the doll's mouth, a magnet or something activates and the peas would go straight up into the handle of the spoon. Of course, this would happen really fast, so kids would think that the doll ate it. To get more peas on the spoon, I think you dip the spoon into a jar and that would release the magnet. Found it.